And then for your next sip, what I want you to do is keep the wine in your palate and do what we call a reverse whistle. So you're pulling air in the same way you'd be pulling air in when you swirl the wine in the glass. It actually heats up on your palate a little bit and it draws out more of the aromatics. You actually have sensory receptors for aroma in the back of your palate, so you can smell as you're breathing it in. So I'm going to do this first, and then you guys can follow. And I'm getting a lot of those aromatics that I smelled in the wine on the palate as well. This one has some really nice acidity, which means it's a great food pairing wine. The tannins are soft, surprisingly, and it's just kind of medium bodied. It's a great little easy drinking red wine. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So just a little bit about Herndon Estates Cabernet Sauvignon while you guys are sipping on this one here. All of our Cabernet Sauvignon grapes are grown in the Creek Shores and Short Hill Bench area, which are two vineyards very close to our winery. The majority of it does come from the Creek Shore vineyard. Niagara, as I mentioned, is a cooler wine region, meaning Cab Sauves here will have a little bit more acidity and tannins than they would from a warmer region. It has a more balanced alcohol content. Australian Cab Sauves, for example, could go up to like 14%. Both of those characteristics giving it great ageability. And all of our wines here are barrel aged for a minimum of 12 months, primarily in French oak, but we do use American oak as well. Okay. So this is, like I said, it's our entry-level, everyday, easy drinking Cabernet Sauvignon. Our 2012 that we have included in the package is our Deep Roots Cabernet Sauvignon. This is what we would call a reserve wine. So reserve wines are, the word reserve is not a regulated term by VQA or any other appellation in the world. It's a word that you can, that a winery would put on a wine that they think deserves that title. Wondering what you guys think of this. How do you feel about this? But for us at Herndon Estates, we only put this title on wines, number one, when they come from a really great vintage year that we know has ageability, or that vintage year showcases that varietal to its highest standards. And we also would start in the vineyard with a reserve wine. So we pick the best blocks, the ripest blocks. We treat them a little bit differently in the vineyard. We would thin them out a bit more, have more concentrated flavors. We bring them into the winery. As I mentioned here in the notes, this one has been barrel aged for 20 months as opposed to this one, which was only 12 months. So it does spend a little bit more time in oak to give it a little bit more integration, soften up a bit. And if it does come from a really hot, dry year, it has a lot of the tannins that are able to do that. Let's see. So let's go ahead and taste this wine. When you're, I already poured it. When you taste a wine that has been aged a little bit, what you're going to expect is a little less astringency. Astringency, when I talk about that on your palate, is kind of that puckering, drying an effect on your palate, just like a really strong cup of tea would give you. So the astringency kind of settles out and you get a little bit more roundness on the palate. You'll probably get a little bit more complexity as well because it has been barrel aged for a little bit longer, and as I mentioned, you know, the grapes are treated a little bit differently to develop more characteristics. So let's go ahead and taste this one. If you compare it color-wise, you'll notice how it's starting to get a bit more brownish as opposed to red. And that's what happens to red wines as they age. They go from purple to a bit reddish to more brickish as they age. So we'll give this a nice swirl. Very nice. Very fruity, and as I mentioned, I get a lot of that oak, and it's very integrated in the wine. It almost smells like chocolate-covered strawberries to me. Quite lovely. Yeah, and it is softer on the palate, not as astringent, a little bit rounder, and it lingers a little bit longer on my palate, I find. How is everybody else finding this wine? Do we have any comments on these first two wines that we've tasted so far? Yes? Kim, did you want to make a comment? We'd love to hear from you guys. Don't be shy asking our little questions. Yeah, I'm really enjoying these two. This 2012, I'm getting kind of chocolate on the aftertaste as well. Yeah. So
in the chat, we had a message from Heather Brooks. She said that they were both wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather. That's a great comment. Heather just said that she loves both. They're wonderful. It's great to hear. Thank you so much.
And we see your thumbs up, Heather and Julie. We see you guys agreeing with another big swig.
That's a great way to show a winemaker you love their wine, is by just chugging her back.
And we got another message in the chat from Kim. She said it's very smooth.
It is quite smooth, I agree. Yeah. So you can see how aging a wine, it just gets softer as it ages. And we'll move on to the next slide and we'll discuss why this happens.
And thank you so much, Manny and Laura. We see you guys agree. You guys like both of them. You guys said they're both delicious.
Both wines are delicious. I love it. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to our last and, of course, most important red wine here, our 99 Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. Just a little side note, I was still in high school when this wine was produced. Lexi, you were what, 3 years old? So yeah, it's such a gem to be able to taste this wine. And I should mention that back then there were not a lot of wineries in the region. 99, I want to say there was only 5 wineries, and right now there's like 180. And the Hernders were on the frontier of wine producing. So we are very lucky to be tasting this. One of the entry level Cabernet Sauvignons in the region.
Manny and Lori also said they found the Deep Roots chocolatey.
Yes, I definitely get chocolate. Like a strawberry chocolate character.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Lexi, you can try them after.
Oh, yay.
So, Cabernet Sauvignon. So, as a wine matures, what happens? We have these molecules, they're called tannins. These are what give, like I said, that puckering, astringent effect on your palate. But there's also, aromatic compounds, there's acids. So as the wine is aging, oxygen will react with the tannins and kind of soften them up. But the wine is closed, and all the oxygen will react with the tannins in the first couple of months, whatever oxygen is left in the bottle. And then they start binding with each other. And as they bind with each other, they'll start binding with acids as well. So what happens is it actually softens up because the tannins aren't going to be reacting with the proteins in your palate to give you that kind of puckering effect. Hope I'm not getting too technical here. So